Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgy, your guide to all things geeky, and welcome to another episode of Comic Class. But this isn't just any episode of Comic Class. No, you see, this is the last Wednesday of the month. And as I said on the last Wednesday of the month, I am going to start going back and looking at all the brand new #1 issues that have been coming out for Marvel now, and giving you my analysis and my thoughts on each of these books. Now, I know I should have started this last month, but last month, the last Wednesday of the month, was during my Halloween celebration, and I don't care how important Marvel now is, nothing gets in the way of my Halloween celebration. Plus, I just finished doing my DC Rebirth analysis, and I needed a little bit of a break before I started on the next big, giant, massive relaunch that a comic book company has been doing. Now, as you can tell, unlike my normal episodes, I am of course doing this all through audio today. A, because I just think it sounds better, especially for videos like this, and B, because I am currently growing out my winter beard and it doesn't quite look right yet. So I hope that you guys enjoy the sultry sound of my voice as I go through each of these issues. Now, I'm just going to warn you guys, as I said, I did do a complete analysis of all the DC Rebirth books, and I told you what I felt about each of those. But I'm going to go ahead and let you know, I'm going to be a little bit harsher on the Marvel books. I will just go ahead and admit that right at the start, because A, Marvel was doing pretty darn well up until Civil War II, so they didn't really need a big relaunch. They were killing it as it was. Each of their books were doing great, so I don't really see the need for a giant massive relaunch right now, unlike with DC where they really did need to come in there with Rebirth and knock it out of the park and say, we're sorry for the New 52, look at how much better everything is. But also, and this is the big one, the reason I'm going to be a little bit harsher on the Marvel books is simply because of money. Yes, when I tell you that I think a book is good and it is worth reading, I am telling you I think it is worth spending your hard-earned money on that book, and each of the DC books are $3 each, whereas the Marvel books are a minimum of $4, and many of these new #1s are $5. So I'm going to have to judge these books a lot more harsher, because if I come in there and tell you that a DC book is worth spending your money on, I'm telling you it's worth spending $3 on. If I tell you one of these Marvel books is worth spending your money on, I'm telling you it's worth spending $5 on. And if you think that that's unfair, that I am judging Marvel a little bit more critically simply because their books cost more, I would just like to remind you that out of all the $3 books over at DC, there is one that is actually $5 over there, and if you watched my Rebirth in review videos, I actually was a lot more critical of that book. I was a lot harsher on that book. So this is not me pulling favorites, this is me just simply saying, hey man, if I'm going to tell you it's worth spending your money on, I am taking that seriously. But okay, that's everything that I wanted to say at the top, so let's go ahead and get started with part 1 of Marvel Now, Marvel Now Again. Now that's what I call Marvel. Yeah, I still don't know what I'm going to call this video series, because Rebirth in Review was a really easy title to come up with. It flowed pretty nicely. I don't know what play on words I can come up with for Marvel Now 2. But whatever, I'll fix it in post. In part 1, I'm going to be talking about all the books that came out in October, and in part 2, which will be coming out tomorrow, I will be talking about all the brand new #1s that came out in November. So, we're just going to go through these completely in alphabetical order, and that means that we are going to be starting with Cage. Now, this is a book that people thought would never happen. Over a decade ago, Genndy Tartakovsky, the creator of Dexter's Lab, Samurai Jack, Hotel Transylvania, and so many more classic animated series, said he wanted to make a Luke Cage series that was a love letter to how crazy and zany the 1970s were when Luke Cage came into existence. And he wanted to do this for years, and eventually people were like, yeah, that's never gonna happen. So everyone was kind of shocked when it did actually happen. And I know that there were a lot of people who were fans of the Luke Cage Netflix series, and I just have to warn all those people, this is not the book for you. If you want to read about a modern day Luke Cage defending the streets of Harlem, go and read Power Man and Iron Fist. In fact, go and read Power Man and Iron Fist no matter what, because that book is amazing and it needs way more readers. The Cage series is for people out there who just want to see an exaggerated version of how crazy and goofy comics were back in the 70s. If you want to see Luke Cage dealing with important issues out there that are facing real life people, read Power Man and Iron Fist. If you want to see Luke Cage drawn by the guy who created Samurai Jack calling people a jive turkey as he bust up roller skaters, this is the book for you. And in all honesty, yeah, I kind of want to see that. I kind of want to see both of these things, so I can enjoy the Power Man Iron Fist series for one reason, and I actually still have a blast with this Cage series for a totally different reason. And I have been a longtime fan of Genndy Tartakovsky's art style, so seeing him bring his super exaggerated cartoon style to Luke Cage was actually a real treat for me. I loved just looking at the artwork in this book. In fact, in issue 2, there is a moment in which he is trapped on an island and he gets sprayed with some weird toxic plant, and there are just several pages back to back that are just a weird drug trip for Luke Cage. It doesn't advance the plot forward. There's no real reason for it to be there other than for Genndy Tartakovsky to go, hey, look at the weird, crazy stuff I can draw with Luke Cage, and I was impressed. As I said, it didn't really advance the plot forward, but I didn't need it to. I just kind of wanted to check out some really cool, freaky Genndy Tartakovsky art. So yeah, if you are a fan of anything that Genndy Tartakovsky has done, then I absolutely recommend picking up Cage, because this is one of the most Genndy Tartakovsky things I've ever read. I mean, there was a moment in the first issue in which all of Luke Cage's villains all pop up, and he just goes gasp and starts listing off each of the villains as they pop up around him. And I was like, that's straight out of Samurai Jack. That is straight out of Samurai Jack. We have seen stuff like that in there. I loved whenever they would do that back in that series, so I love seeing them do it with Luke Cage. Next up is the Champions. Now, I'm not going to talk that much about the Champions because I already made an episode talking specifically just about that first issue. And after issue 2, my opinions on it pretty much remain the same. So if you want to see it, a card should be popping up right now that will take you to the video where I talked all about the Champions. As I said, not a lot of my opinions have changed after issue 2, although I will say the final page of Champions issue 2 made me literally laugh out loud. Like, I actually burst out laughing when I read that page. So I do wish that issue 2 had had a little bit more action. It was basically just the characters getting to know each other, but you know, that's important, so I am glad that it was there. It did have some good moments, and as I said, that final page was hilarious. So overall, despite the fact that the first issue was $5, I'd still recommend this series. Next, we're going into Doctor Strange and the Sorcerer Supreme. Now, this is a really cool concept for a book in which Merlin has sucked Doctor Strange out of his timeline off to some faraway land that's lost in time, and he's also gathered all the other Sorcerer Supremes from the timeline. And so we're getting introduced to a bunch of brand new Sorcerer Supremes from both the past and the future, including a grown-up version of Billy Kaplan, aka Wiccan, and it was really cool seeing him interacting with Doctor Strange, but also seeing the reason why he was there. In issue 2, we learned that there is a secret reason why Billy decided to join this team, and actually does have me interested in where it's going to go. And I gotta say, a lot of the former Sorcerer Supremes are really darn cool. Like, there's one in there who looks like she's just an old West sheriff, which it's odd to think that they would be a Sorcerer Supreme, but that's actually kind of cool. And there's another one in there that is a Ghost Rider, which is an awesome idea for a Sorcerer Supreme. And one of my favorite ones is they actually have this little snot-nosed kid in there who's just being a total jerk. And then there comes a moment when Doctor Strange is looking at him and he goes, "Oh my God, I know you. You're the Ancient One. You're the one who trained me to be the Sorcerer Supreme. And now I have to deal with you when you're some little snot-nosed, arrogant kid who's just being a jerk." That's actually a great idea. And also, the artwork is pretty darn solid. I was talking about some really trippy artwork in the Cage series. They also do that in this book, and if you're going to have a book featuring all the Sorcerer Supremes, it absolutely should have some really crazy, trippy artwork. So as of right now, I am praising this book pretty heavily. However, aside from the characters, who I am enjoying, it is great watching all of them interact, especially in the second issue. One of the Sorcerer Supremes actually has a mindless one of those big dumb rock creatures that Dormammu uses. he has actually captured one of them and taught how to think and uses him as an assistant. And it's kind of cool seeing the other Sorcerer Supremes actually start to warm up to him and actually seeing him trying to figure out how to interact with them and actually learning about emotions. Like there's a moment where all the Sorcerer Supremes get sucked into a big trap and the mindless one is just stuck there and just goes lonely, sad. And I was like, oh my god, I'm actually feeling things for a mindless one. So it is really cool watching all these characters interact, and the characters are the big draw of this series. However, the rest of the series is just okay. Like, the dialogue is alright, the premise of why they're there and the big threat they're facing, it's fine. Again, if this book was $3, then I would go, yeah man, great fun characters in there, totally worth $3. It's $4, you know, it's worth checking out. If you are a big Doctor Strange and a big Magic fan, then yeah, go ahead and take a look, but I don't know if I could really recommend it to anyone else. Next up is Great Lake Avengers, and oh my gosh, I was looking forward to this book. I have been a longtime fan of the goofy, crazy, cartoony antics of the Great Lake Avengers, but in the back of my mind, I had that little fear that whoever it was that was going to take over this book was not going to capture them the same way that, say, Dan Slott did back when he wrote their miniseries, which was an amazing miniseries. If you have not checked that out, I highly recommend taking a look at it. So I went into this a little bit nervously that they weren't going to really capture the magic of the Great Lake Avengers, and man, I was wrong. This book is excellent. The first issue of Great Lake Avengers might have given me more laughs than any other book I have read this year. I loved how every single one of these characters interacted with each other. I love seeing kind of the heart there, but also the cynicism that goes into them, which really, if you're going to write characters like this, you need that perfect balance. I guess the best example of what I'm talking about is when the book opens up, it's Tony Stark's lawyers finding out that they have lost the name Avengers, so it has been defaulted back to the people who tried unsuccessfully to patent the name Avengers, meaning the Great Lake Avengers. So they then have to travel all the way out to Wisconsin to find Flatman, who is this guy who is basically a two-dimensional version of Mr. Fantastic, and they have to convince him to give them the name Avengers back. And when they knock on the front door, Flatman is just playing video games, and he just goes, if you're a supervillain, no superheroes live here. But if you're the pizza delivery guy, I'd like to inquire about a superhero discount. I was like, that's the Great Lake Avengers right there. And this whole issue is just full of jokes that just kept me laughing all throughout. Like, there's a bunch of jokes in here that actually made me think, is the writer of this someone who used to work on The Simpsons? Because the sense of humor in this series is very similar to what I used to love about The Simpsons back when they were at their A game. Like, there's a moment in here in which they have to move into their new headquarters, which is located in Detroit. And they go to Detroit and find their headquarters, and it is this rundown, dilapidated building. Every single building on that street is just run down and beat up. But then they look across the street at the other side. Every single building is brand new. It's all pristine. It's all very hip and trendy. And Doorman, one of the members of the Great Lake Avengers, just points at it and goes, hey look, it's like someone drew an invisible line around the poor part of town. Now I'm rich, now I'm poor. Now I'm rich, now I'm poor. He just says that as he jumps back and forth, and I was like, this is a straight up Simpsons joke. But I'm not getting mad. I'm not saying, oh, they stole a joke from The Simpsons. I'm saying, oh my god, this is going to scratch that Simpsons itch that I have been having for the longest time. So yeah, if you want a book that is just there solely to make you laugh, I highly recommend Great Lake Avengers. Alright, next up is Infamous Iron Man. Now, this is being written by Brian Michael Bendis. If you guys have watched this show for long enough, then you know I have a massive problem with Brian Michael Bendis. I probably complain about him more than I do any other writer out there. And this is the new series in which Dr. Doom is taking over the mantle of Iron Man, and he's trying to be a hero. And I gotta say, I actually liked it. Yeah, I know that probably is going to surprise many of you because, as I said, I complain about Brian Michael Bendis more than anybody out there. However, he does still do some things well, and pretty much all the things that he does well were in this issue. All the stuff that I like about Bendis was actually in this issue. Or I guess more accurately, it would be better to say all the stuff that I don't like about Brian Michael Bendis was not in this issue. because I really hate how he writes so many characters just so quippy and just shooting dialogue back and forth at each other and just repeating dialogue back and forth at each other. It really just drives me nuts the way that he writes so many characters exactly the same. He did not write Doctor Doom like this. I gotta give him credit. In fact, he didn't really write any of the characters in here like this. And I really enjoy that, yes, we're now seeing Doctor Doom trying to be a hero, but at the same time, it's not Doctor Doom just pulling a complete 180. You still get the sense that he's kind of sinister. You still get the sense that, no, he does not understand what it's like to be a superhero. He's going out there and being a superhero the way that Doctor Doom would be a superhero. Like, he flat out erases some villains from existence when he's trying to take them out. And he just stands there like, well, guess he shouldn't have done that. And it's not all serious gloom in this issue. There actually is some pretty funny moments in there as well. Like, there's a moment in which he goes in and just takes out the Mad Tinkerer, which, by the way, I love that Doctor Doom is basically just going down the checklist of all the other Fantastic Four villains, because if he actually was going to become a hero, I can totally see him going, what was the Fantastic Four never able to do? I'm going to do that. I'm going to take out all their villains, make sure that they're no longer a threat. You can come in here and say, oh, well, that's just Marvel trying to get rid of the Fantastic Four villains because they don't own the movie rights to them. But in all honesty, as I said, that's probably what Doctor Doom would do if he decided to be a hero. But he goes in, takes out the Mad Tinkerer, and then as he flies away, one of the Mad Tinkerer's robots breaks out of its secret lab and is marching towards these two kids who are watching the whole thing. Then Doctor Doom comes back down, destroys the robot, and just looks at the kids and goes, my apologies. I'm not used to saving other people yet. And then flies away. And I was like, how is it that you could say something that was kind of funny, but still really chilling at the same time? And while Doctor Doom is going out there and trying to be a hero, Ben Grimm has recently returned to Earth from the Guardians of the Galaxy, and he's learned, wait a minute, Doom is still around, and he's going around doing some secret stuff. I'm gonna figure out what he's up to. And I gotta say, as I said, I think that Bendis has a problem writing too many characters exactly the same way. I actually think he writes Ben Grimm like Ben Grimm. When I read that, I don't go, oh, this is just another Bendis character. I read that and I go, oh, that's Ben Grimm. Yeah, he captures that voice pretty darn well. And also, at the end of issue 1, we learn who the villain of the series is going to be. And another problem that I have with Bendis is that he loves to come in and just change everything. And don't get me wrong, I applaud writers who swing for the fences. I applaud writers who come in and go, okay, well, I'm going to aim high. But Bendis will change stuff in a way that just makes me go, this is just destroying everything that had been built up by everyone that came before you, rather than actually creating new stuff. And also, it rarely ever even actually makes sense to the story. I read who the villain was going to be, and I said, actually, for a Doctor Doom book, that's a pretty good change to make. That actually is a change that does push his story forward. It actually will end up resolving some stuff from his past, and it actually kind of is the perfect villain for him to end up facing, and I can totally buy it happening. So yeah, there have been many books from Bendis that I have enjoyed, but they all kind of turned sour after a while, so I will go in here and fully admit, I really enjoyed issues 1 and 2 of Infamous Iron Man, but I still have that fear in the back of my mind that, okay, when's it gonna turn around? When is Bendis going to start being Bendis again? But if that doesn't happen, and he can keep up this quality throughout the course of this series, then I am really looking forward to reading the rest of this series. Now, speaking of other Bendis books, Jessica Jones finally returned, and I will admit, when the Jessica Jones series was announced, I was thinking to myself, how on earth are you bringing this back and not making it a Max series? How are you going to put this in the regular Marvel Universe? Because Jessica Jones needs to be gritty. It needs to be dark. It needs to be super adult. And I was reading this, and they started swearing in here and talking about some real heavy issues. And I thought, oh my god, Marvel has just decided, okay, it's alright if we let some of our books now start being R-rated. We realize that the audience for some of these books are going to be adults who are coming in here. It's not going to really be aimed at kids to begin with, so it is okay for us to write these stories aimed at adults. So I gotta give Marvel cred for that. I gotta give them cred for coming in here and saying the Jessica Jones series, despite the fact that it's now part of the regular Marvel Universe and not part of their Max side universe that was made only for adults, it is still going to be a Jessica Jones series. And again, this is being written by Bendis, but as I have said, there are many things that Bendis does that I actually really enjoy. In fact, I think that he does noir very well, and that's what Jessica Jones is. And yeah, he is again doing it very well. And yes, I have mentioned numerous times, I have a problem with Bendis speak, where characters just talk in really quick quips back and forth and just repeat lines back and forth over and over again. But for a character like Jessica Jones, who is a detective going in there and investigating people and asking them questions, yeah, I actually can see that happening. I can see people talking like that, so it actually does fit inside this type of book. And the book starts off with a great mystery because we see that Jessica Jones recently got out of prison. We don't know why she was there, we don't know why she was sent there, and also, again, I should go ahead and let you guys know right now, for many of the books that I'm going to be talking about, I will be giving you spoilers at the end of certain issues, simply because I believe it is important to bring that up in order to discuss what I think about these series. So if you want no spoilers, tune out right now. But at the end of issue 1, we find out that Jessica Jones took her and Luke Cage's baby away from Luke Cage and will not tell him what she did with it. The child has gone missing and no one knows why she did this or where she took the baby. And honestly, I read that and I went, if this was just a Jessica Jones series, if this was all that there was, that would be a hell of a twist. That would have me really engaged. However, there is another thing that Bendis loves to do that drives me insane, which is he will come in and say, I don't care what's happening in other books, I'm going to tell the story that I want to tell. And in all honesty, that's kind of admirable. I can actually kind of applaud a writer for wanting to say, I have a story in mind, I'm not going to worry about continuity, I'm just going to make sure that I tell the best story that I can. I can actually understand why someone would do that, and I can applaud that. However, having Jessica Jones do that completely screws over the Power Man and Iron Fist series, which, as I have said, is one of my favorite series that Marvel has out there right now. So I am very torn about what they have done here. Because on the one hand, if there was no Power Man and Iron Fist series, and this was the only other book that Luke Cage was appearing in, that would actually be a great twist and would have me wondering what is going to happen. But because there is a Power Man and Iron Fist series out there, and a large part of that book depends on Luke and Jessica being together and having a child together, yeah, I'm kind of ticked off about it. So I'm really hoping that they're going to reveal that at the end of all of this, Luke and Jessica work it all out, and this whole Jessica Jones series all took place during that 8-month time skip that happened between the end of Secret War and all these current books coming out. Because then, okay, it doesn't screw over the Luke Cage and Iron Fist series any, and then I can actually accept that. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but I can hope that's what's going to happen. However, speaking of this, that was my feelings towards the book in issue 1. In issue 2, we don't really get any new information. We just learn that, hey, yeah, Jessica took their baby away, and she will not tell anyone why she did it. She will not explain why she was in prison, and we just see all the other heroes thinking that she's crazy. And don't get me wrong, when we eventually learn why she did this, I'm sure there is some good reason. I'm sure that it will be some big reveal, some big twist. However, because I don't know that yet, it's really hard for me to want to root for this character. It is really hard for me to want to follow her story, because as of now, without me knowing any information, I'm just following the story of a lady who kidnapped her child, and that's not fun for me. So after issue 1, I was really engaged, but a little bit mixed at the ending, and with issue 2, I kind of needed some more information. So I'm going to stick with the book for now, but yeah, I don't know what the future holds for this book. Although I will say it is kind of neat to see that the Jessica Jones series is keeping what made it so unique, meaning all of that very hard and edgy writing, but at the same time sticking it right in the middle of the Marvel Universe. And the big mystery that she has to investigate actually ties back into Secret Wars. And as I said, I kind of hate when Bendis comes in here and goes, I'm going to change everything. But for a detective series, this is actually a really cool thing for her to be investigating. I actually really want to see where this investigation is going to go. And also, just as a fun little side note, Jessica Jones in the comics does not look anything like Jessica Jones in the TV series. However, When Jessica Jones was created by Brian Michael Bendis, he did not want to write Jessica Jones. He wanted that to be a Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman series. And when he pitched the idea to Marvel, they said, no way are we letting you do that to Spider-Woman. You create a brand new character for this. And that's how Jessica Jones came to be. There was a moment in issue 1 where Spider-Woman actually does pop up, and the artist drew her to look exactly like the actress who plays Jessica Jones in the TV series looks. I thought that was just a fun little Easter egg that I wanted to point out. Okay, next up is Mosaic. Now, again, this one costs $5 for issue 1, so pretty much automatically I have to take a point off on this. And also, this book was really odd, because it's a character we've never ever heard of before. He appeared for 1 page in an issue of the Inhumans, but at the same time, while I have to scratch my head and wonder why they would then give him a series, I have been saying Marvel needs to take more chances in giving brand new characters their own series, so this actually was kind of cool to see Marvel try that. Now, as for the storyline itself, this is a series all about a professional basketball star who is just super arrogant. He thinks he is the greatest thing to ever hit the basketball court. He thinks that he is the only one on the team that matters. In fact, the opening couple of pages is basically just him going, yeah, there is an I in team, and it's me, and I'm the best. So basically, this series starts by trying to make this character as unlikable as possible, which I found to actually be a really interesting strategy, because that means that this is going to be a series in which you're going to watch him change. You're going to watch him grow and develop, which always makes for a great character arc. However, most writers are too afraid to do that because they think, okay, we have to make him completely likable at the start of the series, otherwise people are not going to keep reading the book. So again, I kind of have to applaud this book for taking that risk. But anyway, this star ends up getting hit by the Terrigen Mist. He then turns into an Inhuman who is basically just some floating energy creature, and he has the power to possess other people. And when he possesses them, for a limited amount of time, he gains all of their knowledge. So any skills or abilities that they have, he would then retain them for a limited amount of time. And we see him jumping from person to person, but he's not just completely controlling them, he kind of melts away into them. Like, he actually starts to forget who he is, and he starts getting really invested in the lives of the people whose bodies he's jumping into. So I gotta say, I actually think this is kind of a cool concept for a character. He's this super arrogant guy who thinks he's the only one that matters, but then he gets these powers that forces him to live like everyone else, to see the world through everyone else's eyes. And like I said, this book was $5, so yeah, I'm not really on board with that, and it makes it a little bit hard to recommend, but I actually really did enjoy issue number 1. I actually thought it was pretty darn cool. I'm a fan of the old school Milestone comics. That's where characters like Static Shock came from, and I was a big fan of them because many of the characters were very different. They had very different voices from what you would typically see in other characters out there. I mean, there was one book from Milestone that was all about a gang. That's the kind of thing that you never used to see in comics. And these heroes typically would focus more on like human interactions. They would focus more on people on the streets and things that real life people are going through. And as I read this book, I was like, this kind of reminds me of those old Milestone books. This guy is super arrogant, and once again, that's not something that you typically see in any other character out there, so automatically it's a different voice. And his powers force him to kind of deal with issues that people are dealing with in the real world. It forces him to see things from the people on the street's point of view, which, again, like I said, that's what I always liked about the Milestone books. So, in a weird way, this kind of gave me that feeling that I've been missing ever since the Milestone books went away. So okay, I've been pretty positive on most of these books so far, but we are now coming to the end of the books in October, and like I said, I'm going in alphabetical order, and sadly, we're not finishing on high points. I'm going to combine both these books together because they both get the meh seal of approval. Prowler and Solo. Now, Prowler, I have some nostalgic love for because I've loved Spider-Man ever since I started reading comics. And back when I started reading Spider-Man, Prowler was actually featured in a lot of books. And I always thought he was pretty cool. Like, he was kind of like Iron Man on a budget because he was a really smart inventor, but he just kind of worked out of his garage. But Solo, on the other hand, again, he was featured in a lot of Spider-Man books. But even as a kid, I never really found Solo to be all that interesting. He was basically the Punisher with teleporting powers, and that was it. And when it comes to these books, Prowler is tying into the clone conspiracy, so at least there's some interesting stuff there. I mean, if you want to see what it's like working for the Jackals organization, you know, you'll get that in this book, but that's really it. And as I said, that's coming from a guy who has nostalgic love for the Prowler. Even I'm like, there's really nothing here for me to recommend to anyone unless you just have to be a completionist when it comes to the clone conspiracy. And in all honesty, I've been reading all the clone conspiracy books so far. There's nothing really in the Prowler book that you'd be missing if you didn't read it. And as for Solo, there's nothing in that book, like, at all. Like, there's nothing really bad in there, but that's because there's nothing good in there either. This is the most right down the middle, 5 out of 10, not worth picking up because it's of no importance at all kind of book that I could bring up. And I hate saying that because I hate saying that about any book. But yeah, the Solo series, it's a guy who hates terrorists, and he goes out there, and then S.H.I.E.L.D. hires him for a suicide mission. That's it. That's all I got. I mean, there's nothing here that was really interesting. Like, they didn't make Solo some really cool action star with great quips who you wanted to read about, but they didn't make him comedic like he is over in the Deadpool series. He was very flat and right down the middle, which is kind of how this entire book was. So, yeah, I absolutely have to give both Solo and Prowler a big pass. You do not have to check these out in any way, shape, or form. Even if they were only $3 instead of $4, they'd still kind of be hard for me to recommend. But okay, that's it for part 1 of my look at all the Marvel Now books. So make sure that you come back tomorrow for part 2, in which I will be looking at all the books from November. And if you like this episode, then make sure that you click that subscribe button. Make sure you click that thumb up button. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought about each of these books. You guys know the deal. Make sure that you come back tomorrow. I'll see you then. Bye, everyone.